Here. Monica Caldecott.
Here.
Rosie Camargo. Here. Jean Carroll.
Here.
Alex Friesen.
Here.
Gwen Gregory.
Here.
Diane Hollister.
Here.
Jennifer Hovenick. Renee Leva.
Here.
Julie Melvick.
Here.
Thomas Staggs.
Here.
Alex Mancina.
Here.
Vanessa Villareal Krenzel.
Here.
Karen Wojtek.
Here.
Yolande Wilburn.
Here.
And Catherine Yanikowski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Stacy. We'll handle guests and public comments at the same time. Let's start with guests here in Burr Ridge.
Monica Harris, Rails.
Sharon Swanson, Rails.
Jessica Silva, Rails.
Amy Hoff, Rails. Diana Rush, Rails.
Dan Boss from Rails.
Anna Beam, Rails.
Layla Heath, Rails. Stacy Palmisano, Rail.
Rails.
Laura Nemeth, Rails.
Joe Philippek, Rails.
Thank you. Are there any public comments here in Burr Ridge? Hearing none, we'll move on to East Peoria. Are there guests in East Peoria?
Kendall Larson, Rails and RSA.
Anthony Zeta, RSA and Rails.
Are there any public comments in East Peoria? All right, thank you. Stacy, will you read the names of guests on Zoom?
We have Greg McCormick, Illinois State Library. Ann Slaughter, Rails. Barry Curry, Rails.
Thank you. Are there any public comments from Zoom participants? If not, have we received any public comments by email? Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to move any item from the consent agenda to the regular agenda for further discussion? If not, may I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Yolande, thank you.
Second. Karen.
Karen, thank you. Stacy, would you please call roll?
Monica Caldecott.
Yes.
Rosie Camargo.
Yes.
Jean Carroll.
Yes.
Alex Friesen.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory.
Yes.
Diane Hollister.
Yes.
Jennifer Hovenick.
Yes.
Renee Leva.
Yes.
Julie Melvick.
Yes.
Thomas Staggs.
Yes.
Alex Mancina.
Yes.
Vanessa Villareal Krenzel.
Yes.
Karen Wojtek.
Yes.
Yolande Wilburn.
Yes.
Catherine Yanikowski.
Yes.
Thank you. Sharon will now give the Rails financial report.
Hello, everyone. Right before a holiday weekend. I will try to make this very short because I know we have a long agenda. So the same trends are continuing as they have since the start of the fiscal year. So not too much different this month. I'll start with the April 30th general fund cash and investment balance. We had approximately $26 million. And this would fund approximately 22.8 months of budgeted fiscal year 2024 operations. General fund revenues through April were nearly $17.1 million, and this is approximately 2.56 million above budget, primarily due to the receipt of the APC, the last portion of our APC grant revenue late in April 22nd to be specific. This was $1.9 million, and this was the federal or LSTA portion of our grant. And as I mentioned, final portion of our grant, this is the fourth year in a row that Rails has received the entire amount of our grant within the same fiscal year of the award. And this is either right before May or within May of that same year. So we've seen the same pattern 4 years in a row, which is great. Investment income, this above budget revenue is also due to, of course, above budget investment income, as has continued throughout the year. Current interest rates for our money market accounts are averaging 5.4%, which is a very, very slight increase since March. This is compared to the budget at 3.74% interest rates that were factored into our fiscal year 2024 budget. Interest rates are remaining level at the moment. The Federal Reserve is trying to be very conservative right now and wait till inflation comes under more sustained control before they make any changes to interest rates. So previously they projected 0.75% percentage point cuts for this calendar year before the end of the calendar year. But it's looking a little bit more uncertain at this point that maybe they'll keep rates stable a little bit longer. So recently there have been signs that inflation is starting to come under control, but again, they're being extremely conservative. And this gradual decrease in rates has been factored into the fiscal year 2025 budget projections for interest rates. General fund expenditures through April, they were a little over $13.2 million and were nearly $615,000 below budget. This is mostly due to lower library materials expenditures due to timing differences. So this is timing differences on our budgeted and actual group purchase expenditures that included Creative Bug, BrainFuse, Press Reader, Communico, and the Smart Horizons Career Online High School subscriptions and programs. This is also due to lower contractual services expenditures, and this was normal timing differences, as well as a less than anticipated fuel recovery surcharge from our third-party contractor that does our delivery outsourcing services for us. And we did make the final award for the second round of cataloging grants. The final award was $20,514, and this is $68,674 below the budgeted amount. So we will be under budget at the end of the year for this cost category. Lower vehicle expenditures also contributed to these below budget expenditures overall. And these were due to timing differences between receiving and paying our monthly fuel card invoices, as well as much lower than anticipated fuel charges for the year. The prices have been fluctuating between $3.64 per gallon and $2.74 per gallon at the tax-free rate for the whole fiscal year up to this point, which is well below the $4.25 per gallon that we had budgeted. But we are, for fiscal year 2025, still projecting that $4.25 per gallon, just to allow for the possibility of full-blown conflict in the Middle East and what that means. Of course, this is partially offset by the fact that vehicle repairs are still continuing to run above budget due to our very aging fleet, which we are gradually replacing. During the month of April, Rails did pay for $14,049 for improvements to the security, accessibility, and access of our new Rockford facility. This included installing cabling for internet access, the security system, and the new key fob system at the facility, as well as installing a security camera system and purchasing a portion of the equipment for the key fob system, which will be, the project will be completed in fiscal year 2025, and the remainder of the project is budgeted for fiscal year 2025. We also spent $2,188 as a deposit to begin the long deferred renovations of the Cole Valley bathrooms. And in total, Rails budgeted $50,000 for fiscal year 2024 for the renovations of the Cole Valley facility. And to date, Rails has spent $23,251 of this total amount, so a little less than half. And that's all that I had for this month. Does anyone have any further questions?
Thank you, Sharon. We'll move on to reports. I have no report this month. Next on the agenda are the Rails Board Committee reports. Are there any additions to those reports or questions regarding the reports in the packet?
I want to apologize to my advocacy committee group that I could not join you this month. I do my best, but it was one of those, had to be in two places at once. So thank you for the summary of what the great conversation sounds like it was.
We'll move on to the Rails report. Monica?
Thank you, Alex, and hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. Wanted to just call your attention to a few things that were in the report and let you know at least one change that happened in our Illinois legislative update. So something that you probably saw that was related to House Bill 4567. That is the bill that amends the criminal code to protect libraries in relation to threats and disorderly conduct. On May 21st, there was an amendment that was shared with that bill that did change sort of the focus, it seemed, from employees to libraries in general. But it did also potentially add some grant money for library security efforts to that bill. That was passed by the House on May 21st, 89-20, and it will now head to the Senate. So that's different than what you had in your report. So I wanted to share that with you. We're very pleased to see that moving forward. I think that a lot of Rails members really appreciate those efforts from Secretary Janulius and from that House passage. House Bill 4224, that is the treasurer bill. Currently, that is waiting. It's had its third reading by the Senate. We have news that the deadline has been established for May 24th, which is today. So hoping to hear more, but we'll let you know when we know more. In terms of other things that are happening at Rails that we wanted to share with you, you probably hopefully got a chance to see the digital accessibility pulse page. That's pulling together a lot of the information that we talked about at our meeting last month. It includes a memo from Ansel Glink, who wrote how libraries can respond if they are receiving a complaint to make sure that they're compliant. It also includes information about upcoming continuing education programs and our Rails member update that's coming on June 6th, which is also going to focus on digital accessibility. So we're continuing to get a lot of questions about this and a lot of interest in this from Rails members, and we will continue to offer you as much information as we can when we can. But I do want to encourage all of you who can to please take a look at that. And if you can, please attend our Rails member update, which has been rescheduled for June 6th. I apologize for the postponement of that event. It was due to an unforeseen cancellation because of a speaker, but we are excited to have it back on board, and we're looking forward to meeting with Rails members soon. Wanted to give you a little bit of an update around the Rails board elections. I really wanted to thank all of our candidates. We had an incredible slate of candidates who all put in a lot of work into their slate and what they showed, why they were interested in the board, and the videos. The videos were a new ad that happened for this year, and we were really happy to see how much engagement that has happened around those videos. So a lot of work went into that, both from our candidates as well as from our staff. So I want to thank the staff for that as well. Just in terms of an update for where we are at, as of yesterday afternoon, we were at 297 votes. So just as a comparison point, in total in 2023, we had 319 votes. That was the most that we had ever had. Just as an understanding, we have to do some cleanup after we receive all of those votes to look for duplicates. So I'm not sure if that number will hold, but we are hopeful that we will end up somewhere close to or hopefully above that 319 that we had last year. A lot of efforts went into promoting the election this year, including print pieces that people received. There were some I voted stickers that have been shared on social media so that people could make sure that they were sharing, that they were participating. Our social media marketing communications team has also been sharing where the votes are coming from. So if you want to take a look, you can see sort of the pie charts in terms of who is voting of the Rails membership and where those are coming from. So really great efforts. And I think just again, in trying to get more people engaged with that election, because we know how important our Rails board is. So thanks to everybody who's been working on that piece. I also just wanted to share some news. We were really excited that Rails has an annual presentation on the value of libraries that was accepted for the ILA annual conference. I know that there's lots of great presentations coming there, and that is going to feature information about the value, the economic value of libraries across the state. It should dovetail with our new data piece that some of you from the advocacy committee saw a preview of around how libraries are important to Illinois and the money that goes into libraries, but also the value that they bring. It'll also include information about the statewide database package, about the Rails and IHLS delivery, and then the values of going fine free. So we're really excited to see that moving forward and very thrilled to be a part of that process. There's a lot coming ahead for June, as well as all the other stuff that we have on the agenda today. So I will stop there unless any of you have questions, comments, anything you'd like to know. Yes.
I appreciated Ola's kind of update of the percentage of libraries that voted. And of course, it does seem low. I think I had two thoughts on, and one of them might be like, there's no way we could do that. but just maybe acknowledge the other one, that if it's one vote per organization, I know, I mean, for a large public library where you might have, half the staff or more than half the staff with L2 accounts. So this is my idea. Is there any way to let everybody with an L2 account vote and then Rails kind of like sift it down into, okay, from my school district, we had 4 votes and the top vote getters were X, Y, and Z or something. Because I think, I know it feels to me like sometimes when you think, oh my gosh, like this, I'm like voting on behalf of everybody. Like, do I have that power? Do I take the time to find everybody who has a part in that vote and say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Like, I read I watched all the videos and I read all the the candidate bios. And so other people in my school district were like, dude, you know more than I do, go right ahead. But I know that, I don't know, like that, I struggle with that. And I wonder that sometimes that might account for low voting, just the process of figuring out how do you get members of your organization to get to a point where they agree, or maybe in some organizations, there is nothing like that. It's just the person at the top clicks the button and clicks the button. I don't know. I was just thinking, would there be some way to allow the members who are getting more and more engaged, members at all levels getting more and more engaged with Rails, to not feel like, I don't know, like they want me in all these other ways, but like, I'm not good enough to vote, or like my vote isn't something. I don't know if that any of that made sense, but yeah, okay. That was just my feeling.
I had people,
Right.
staff, that was like, Rosie, I'll vote for you. I'm like, yeah, you can't, but can you tell your director? Like, your director
Right.
can do it. So that was very, like, vote for me. Actually, tell your director to vote for me. You know me because we work in networking. I worked at Evanston, I worked at South Holland and Niles, and everyone's like, yeah, we want to vote for you. And we got new directors who have no idea who I am. So it's kind of hard. It was like, thank you for your support. Tell your director.
And these things are always really challenging for a lot of the reasons that I think both of you are outlining. I think when it comes to how the votes come in, that is something that's established by the bylaws. And there's a lot of things to think about when you think about, because there are some libraries that have a lot of staff who would have an outsized vote if every single L2 person was able to vote, as opposed to libraries that are members who might only have one person who's eligible to vote. So I think these are big questions that would require big changes if there was anything that was able to even be changed about that process. Yeah.
I think that's an interesting marketing angle to take in for next year. Like, how do you talk to your staff about Rails votes or things like that? As a director, like, because you're telling your staff, hey, Rails is for you too. It's not just for me. Like, did you know, have you watched? And maybe it's even a way to feed the bench in the long run, to have people become more involved in the long time too. So I think all of the stuff this year, this was the most engaged I feel like I've been, and I've been in Rails libraries for over 10 years. So it's amazing to see the evolution of it. So maybe that's a good thing to keep in mind, is another phase in the future.
Or if there was some tool that Rails could offer to member libraries, that they could use this tool, I'm making this up, use this voting tool or this survey tool on your own to let all of your interested parties put in their vote, and then that person, whoever was, dubbed the voter, would have data. Now they could make that on their own, but they might not.
Like a straw poll.
Yeah, right. I don't know, just something, or if there was a way to kind of filter from everybody in an organization, down to their vote. That could happen on the Rails end.
Now, in a school library, who votes in a school library? Just the.
Well, it's one vote per school district. So, I mean, that could be, you have, Elgin U46 district. I mean, they have, I don't know, hundreds of schools.
So who do they pick?
I don't know. I don't know. And my,
No, is that why they're not voting?
Sometimes it's the superintendent, sometimes it's the director of curriculum, sometimes it's the district librarian.
and sometimes it's none of them because they don't really know.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe some of the voting I mean, it's easy to figure out who's voting in a public library. It's the director.
Right.
But in these smaller, like the law library, like who votes there?
Usually the director.
The law, okay. I'm just wondering, are these smaller, do they know who's voting, who can vote?
Yeah.
And if it's a whole school district, which I didn't realize, maybe they think, oh, Niles is the biggest school, they're the ones that are voting, and Niles has no idea.
Right. Right.
No, Renee's.
Just to add, I think the L2 account is actually probably the best shot you got, which is like that would be a really good new fiscal goal would be to increase L2 accounts. That way that everyone essentially does see the updated information in regards to voting. I think having that information in regards to the schools, seeing which representative of their school actually has the voting power would be nice to have available so that all the people who do have an L2 account can say, hey, check out your place. So Fossil Ridge for me, right? You go to Fossil Ridge, your voting decision is your board president or director. You go to the school, your voting person is your superintendent, or it could be actually the principal just because they don't want to deal with it. But I think by at least having that who has the power to vote listed there, doesn't have to actually be the name of the person because there's always people changing.
Right.
But by having that available, transparency purposes, then at least you have all the teachers or librarians who can reach out to say, hey, I just want to let you know, you should really think about Rosie or consider Rosie as a candidate just because of the fact that we see them actually doing things around or other candidates. But having that, I think, like I said, we can somehow make it a goal for the year of let's increase up 2 accounts and then hopefully showcase who has those voting powers, right? Not per se just the role, not the actual person. Then at least they can make that effort of reaching out to their representative.
And is it true that there's a point person at each member that is the power, or is it just, it could be anybody? Like I could say like, Rosie, you get to vote for us this year and you're voting, like you're the one clicking, yes, I have the power to vote. Cause I mean, that's what I did, to be honest. Like, I don't know. But I'm just that kind of a person. Like no one told me I couldn't. So man, I'm going to vote because I think nobody else in my school district knows what the heck it is.
Yeah.
And I on purpose asked my 2 fellow librarians and they were like, again, dude, like you know the people, you know the thing, you vote. But I didn't go call the superintendent and say, do I have the power to do this? I just did it. So is that true that there is somebody listed?
Go ahead, Dan.
Please.
Yep.
So typically it is the person who's the primary administrator for the agency of the L2 account.
Okay.
More than just a fiscal goal, it's my life's work to increase L2 accounts. So, I appreciate that. And yes, I mean, that's the people we communicate with. Typically, when we send out those letters, we send it to the person who's the primary administrator, the person who typically does certification for the library, right? And the person who's listed as the person who we would contact if there was something amiss about delivery or resources, that sort of thing. But your point is well taken. I mean, just having more people know about this, I mean, it's very difficult to communicate these things, especially when superintendents, principals, they don't know anything about Rails. Right. So we have to start from a foundation that is very shaky.
And we've, made so many efforts over the last couple of years to expand just an understanding of the election, making sure we're getting more votes. But that brings up a lot of these questions, which are excellent. And I think we will just continue to try to make this process better every year and try to find ways to make sure that we have these questions that you all are bringing up addressed. So we'll continue to look at it and look at it with the nominating committee. But great points, and I think really valuable discussion.
So just to your point, I'm looking at the agency for community high school district 128, and the primary administrator is you.
There we go. I gave myself that power. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. Well, you guys are really glad that I duded you and not bruh you. I could have said bruh.
Any Any other questions? Any comments from the Rails report this month?
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Next, we have Kate Niehoff with the Rails Continuing Education and Consulting Program overview.
Hey, everyone. I just have to share my slides real quick. And I gotta go back to the beginning. All right, so thank you for letting me talk to you today. I'm Kate. I'm the Director of Consulting and Continuing Education here at Rails. I've been in public libraries for many, many years and have been doing continuing education events for library staff for a long time. I don't know if any of you remember Arliss CE. I think it was part of NSLS way back in the day, but I joined them and we put on continuing education events for adult services librarians. And then they kind of morphed into the Recharge Committee and broadened their scope to do continuing education events for all kinds of library staff. I was on the Laconia POP board for a while and the Laconia governing board for a year or two with Jen. And then I also started a community engagement networking group here at Rails, and we did quarterly speakers and events for community engagement staff around the area. So I am happy to have a full-time job doing this thing that I've loved doing for a long time. And then on our team is Diana Rush, who's here today, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everyone. If you don't know me, Diana Rush. I've been here, it was 5 years in April. I'm also a adjunct reference and instruction librarian at Joliet Junior College. So, and I've been, before that, I was in libraries, I think 2007, and before that, I did marketing.
And then we also have Margie Schmidt, who was sad she couldn't be here today, but she has been with Rails in different departments for I think 10 or 11 years. So it's great to have somebody on our team with that history. So of course, part of what we do is put on continuing education workshops and events for our member library staff. In the last year, we've done 41 events. We've had over 2,750 attendees attend those live. And then I didn't put the statistic on my slide, but over 1,300 people have watched the recordings of the events that we've recorded in the past year. So that's almost a full third of the people who have attended this last year's set of events have attended online on their own time. And then over 2,800 YouTube views in 2024. And that's of our whole archive of CE events. So you can see even after years, these events still have a long life. I put this feedback from an attendee of an event that Margie Schmidt did because it makes me happy. And I thought it might make you guys happy too. But we love getting feedback like this. And Margie and Diana are really great at knowing what is going to be a big draw for people. So this event was like the best children's books of 2024. We had over 200 people attend, a lot more registered. I know a lot of people have watched the recording. And Diana has, I think, close to 350 people registered for an upcoming social work setting boundaries for library staff with Beth Waller. So we do a lot of these kind of big crowd pleasers, which is awesome. But we also do smaller events that get smaller crowds but have a really big impact on people. So we just did our EDI training for trustees, and we got really great feedback after that. Diana's planning a bookbinding event for the fall, which, we know is not going to draw 300 people, but, I think it's going to be a really great thing for libraries that can't afford to be replacing their materials all the time. And then we try to be really responsive too. So with everything going on with web accessibility right now, we have our e-accessibility webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. And then we also do a lot of collaborations too. We work a lot with the Heartland Library System, an ILA to do some of these statewide events like Directors University 2.0. And then my counterparts at ILA and Heartland and I get together monthly. So we're brainstorming other ways that we can collaborate too. And then the one thing that I'll mention, because it just happened today and we're super excited, Diana sent into ISBE our application to become approved as a professional development hour provider.
Okay, that's really helpful.
So that application was a lot more complex than we realized, but Diana did a great job. We're excited for that. So maybe in a month or two, we'll get to announce that we've been approved. Okay, and then we also do CE event grants because we do so much here and we can't do it all. It's a really nice way for us to help out library staff who want to delve deeper into something. So then twice a year, library staff can apply. They set up their own continuing education events and Rails will fund up to $2,000. So in the picture on the left, that's this year's Information Literacy Summit put on by the College of DuPage and DePaul Libraries. Diana attended that one. It sounds like it was a really great day of programs for academic librarians. And then of course on the right is Tracy Hall, former director of ALA. The BIPOC Library Staff Networkers group put on this event. Margie actually helped on the back end of the Zoom and we promoted it on L2. So a lot of people thought this was a Rails event, which meant we got a lot of the feedback and it was amazing. People really loved that. And then part of what we do is consulting. We consider ourselves the reference desk for librarians. So when libraries have issues or questions that they don't know how to answer, we will connect them with the right resource, the right people. Sometimes we connect libraries to one another if they're going through the same thing or someone has experience. And as Joe said the other day, we hope to be the first place libraries think of when they have an issue. So that's something we strive for with that service. And then we provide an HR Source discounted membership for libraries with operating budgets below $1 million. Last year, we had 284 calls to the HR Source hotline. And our HR Source contact just sent over some interesting statistics. It looks like the vast majority of calls were about policies and procedures. And then a lot of calls also about FMLA and ADA requirements and termination and discipline. So those are kind of the top reasons people call. And then we provide the NCIL Blink FOIA OMA hotline, and that's statewide. So Heartland libraries can use that as well. And last but not least, we put together training for Rails staff. So you may have been reading about it in your board packets, but we've done a lot of EDI training for staff. Just last week, we did EDI training for staff. And next week, we'll have EDI training for managers at Rails. We'll also this summer start planning the next staff engagement day. This picture is from last year's staff engagement day. And we're going to be focusing a lot in the coming year on supervisor training for supervisors at Rails. And that is all that I had for you.
That's all?
When we heard from Ola at a recent board meeting, she said she would do a training on social media. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Okay.
She did a presentation at the IOA Marketing Forum recently.
Good.
And it was very well received. So
Okay.
I'm sure she could repurpose some.
Yeah, love it.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Kate. All right, next is Greg McCormick with the Illinois State Library. Greg?
Good morning, everyone. As Monica has already mentioned, the legislature is very, very busy today and appears that it will be through this weekend. Certainly, we have been a part of those discussions and looking at funding for libraries, and this all looks to be like a very strong session for the Secretary's library and literacy program. So we're anxious to be able to share more of those details, hopefully next week with the State Library Advisory Committee. The legislature will have finished its work Sunday night. Earlier this month, or I should say at the end of last month, the Secretary held listening sessions with public libraries, leaders, and the library systems on 4 listening sessions with Rails members and Heartland members. The Secretary, Deputy Secretary Hannah Jabay, Chief Deputy Eileen Kim, Anna Clausen, and I were all a part of those listening sessions. The office found those so informative. We've continued our discussion about what was learned in those discussions with the librarians, and we are working on a response document to all of the questions that were posed in chat and otherwise left unanswered, and we will share that back with everyone. We're looking at how we will hold future similar sessions, and also how we will incorporate discussions with other library types in the state. But this was our way of learning how we might have those focused discussions with libraries across the state. So I'm certain you will hear more to come on that. Earlier this month, and I mention this because there was a nice article in the Daily Southtown about one of the recipients, but the Secretary made awards for the Letters About Literature program through the Illinois Center for the Book here at the State Library. We received over 3,000 letters from students and selected 3 winners in 3 different age categories. And the article was surrounding Amira Hamad, who was a student at Tinley Park High School. She was the level 3 winner. Something that we often don't discuss on the library side, but we do, of course, have a significant literacy program administered here at the State Library. And the Secretary also hosted the Spotlight on a Literacy Awards, honoring 10 students from the over 8,000 that attend programs statewide, and also 10 tutors who donate their time for one-on-one tutoring with those adult learners. That is always a very nice program as well, and something we're look forward to each year. I know that everyone is most anxious to hear more about the statewide e-resources package. A vendor has been selected. We are working with the vendor on initial implementation and the actual contract that must be signed so that we have a firm implementation date. That must occur prior to July 1. And we will be making, I think, a series of announcements from not only this office, but from the vendor itself. So we are very pleased with the end result of that, but we want to make sure that we have everything signed off on before we formalize any announcement to the library community. So I appreciate your patience on that. This has been a long time coming, but it will make a dramatic impact across the state. I really don't have anything further this morning to report on. The State Library Advisory Committee does meet next week. There are probably a lot of activity in the coming weeks regarding grant announcements, et cetera, from our office. So
Thank you, Greg. Any questions?
Director McCormick, I just want to extend our thanks, especially, I know we're getting a lot of questions about the statewide database, and I know you are certainly getting a lot of questions about those, but we know this is going to be such a huge impact for Illinois libraries, and I think there's just so much excitement around that because the work that went
Yes.
into this. So I just want to extend our thanks to the secretary and to your office for all the work that you're doing around this. We're so thrilled to see this moving forward.
And thank you for your support in this. So, and understanding. So I wish I could just lay it all out here right now, but it's just not possible for me to do that today.
Thank you, Greg.
I have a question.
Sure.
Gwen?
Is there any update or schedule on the OER grants?
We do have tentative, we have recommendations on what will be funded, yes. And that is one of the announcements the academic libraries will be hearing from us very, very soon.
Great, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to new business, starting with Jessica Silva with a new member request.
Hi, everyone. We have a request to join Rails from Liberty CUSD number 2, a public school district. Becky Esselman is a literacy specialist for the district, and she submitted an L2 help request. Dan was able to connect with her to get the district started on the membership application process. Dan and I have met with the literacy specialist, Becky Esselman, librarian Crystal Whalen, and Superintendent Kelly Bunch about the district libraries, Rails membership, and they are interested in the per capita grant as well as other school library grants. We had a really great conversation, and part of the issue that we determined is there's no public library in their town. They're interested in membership, and their superintendent, Kelly Bunch, helped us greatly by sharing Rails marketing materials with other superintendents and district area employees at a Two Rivers region area meeting that they held. They would make a really great Rails member, and they'll make a great addition to Rails school library members. Do you have any questions for me?
Describe where in Illinois Liberty is.
Adams County, very close to Boise.
Okay, got it.
Close to where?
Boise.
Oh.
I got an Illinois map.
All right, if there are no questions, may I have a motion and a second to approve membership in Rails for Liberty CUSD number 2 and send to the State Library for final approval?
I move that we accept Liberty Community Unit School District number 2 as a member of Rails.
Monica and Rosie, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next up is Dan Bostrom with a update on the certification report for 2024.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Usually I'm saying good afternoon, but today we're saying good morning. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I'm here as a representative for the certification team, and I want to just mention their names because they put in so much work. Emily Feister, Stacy Palmisano, Renya Krempel, Mary Kate Murray, and Karen Goyer. So these people do a brilliant job of shepherding our libraries through the annual certification process every single year. And as you know, libraries must certify in order to maintain their membership. This takes place during January and March. Every year we get a long list of libraries who we get to March and we haven't heard a thing from them, right? This is not uncommon. So our team is extremely proactive about reaching out to these people. And I'm going to say that again, they're extremely proactive about reaching out to these people. They will not let people forget about this. They start weeks before the deadline, the March 31st deadline, emails, phone calls, whatever it takes. There's an internal sort of support team around them. They'll reach out to me, they'll reach out to Jessica and say, what do you know about this school district? Or what do you know about this special library that's not responding? The message is always the same. Like, what can I do to help you fill out this form, right? What can I do to make sure that you get certified, that you maintain your membership, especially for school districts that don't know about this, that might, have a problem or not know about it. So inevitably through this process, we come upon libraries where circumstances have changed. So they no longer have a library, or they don't have a paid employee working in that library. or they're just simply not interested in Rails membership for whatever reason. So when they supply that information, we mark them as withdrawing. That means that they are going to voluntary withdraw from the system. So, and you can see in that document here, there are 18 libraries on that list. I do want to note that Peoria Notre Dame is on there in the withdrawing list accidentally. They should be suspended. So they're also listed in the suspension category. They were listed twice. In the case of suspension, this is not a happy thing, but usually it's just they haven't responded to anything. We've called, we've emailed, we've begged, we've pleaded. They just haven't responded to us at all. And sometimes in these circumstances, we've called or emailed 10 plus times, right? Just trying to get a hold of them. So we are not leaving anybody out to dry. I want to really emphasize that. There are a lot of safeguards built into this process so that if they're ignoring us, it's because purposely. Typically, it's not accidentally. So every year we come at this time, we come before this body in order to request a recommendation for withdrawal suspension of these members. So what that means is if this is approved, we will send this list to the Illinois State Library for final approval. They have all final approval on every single action, including adding new members. So we'll send this list to them. We will withdraw the libraries that are in the withdrawn list, and then we will start the suspension process for the libraries that we are suspending. The suspension process includes another letter to them, includes the ability for them to appeal, all this kind of stuff. So that's all I have for, okay, we got questions, great.
Yeah, so Jen and I kind of realized this too. So is the Pritzker Military Museum just gonna be a museum?
They're moving to Wisconsin.
I'll make.
Oh,
I did.
It moved to either Pleasant Prairie or Mount Pleasant, yeah. I think they maybe got a better deal up in Wisconsin.
So does everybody else in Illinois.
So
Libraries in the.
their whole collection, I actually I went there not too long ago. They're moving their whole collection up there. The museum they're gonna expand the museum. It's no longer gonna be on Michigan Avenue.
Pleasant Prairie is really only a hop over the border anyway.
Unfortunately, we can't make
It's still visit.
we can still visit, yeah.
Yeah. Dan, can you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you have a separate question? Or is that the same question?
Had the same one as Pritzker. It says museum and library, and you said no longer has a library. Like, does it have a museum? I'm like, what is this
I
place?
don't know what they're doing, so I don't know what they're doing with the Michigan Avenue location, because I think it's still there, but I do know that they're building a whole new campus in Wisconsin. And all this.
Any more space?
The question I had, could you explain the distinction again between no longer have a library and voluntary withdrawal?
So the voluntary withdrawal is they no longer have a library. That's a pretty obvious thing, right? Voluntary withdrawal is maybe they haven't disclosed the reasons that they don't want to become a Rails member, and we don't require that. That's the distinction.
Okay, all right.
On the suspension?
Yeah.
How long are they suspended before we would then at some point say?
That is up to this body. But if we suspend them and 3 months down the line, they want to reapply, they could go through that process.
But at some point, we would officially just withdraw them, right? Yes, okay.
Yeah. And, we typically, when we come to this body with new member requests, if we have the information about them either having withdrawn or been suspended in the past, we will typically have that information in that membership background document that you get. So you'll know.
My question was very similar. Suspension is the first step towards withdrawals.
Yeah. Suspension is like, what would you call this? Is like involuntary withdrawal.
Yeah, so it's like a probationary period, like.
No. It's like, it's final. I mean, it's just, we have to take certain steps. We have to send them a letter. We have to wait a certain amount of time, and then we send another letter basically verifying that they've been suspended.
Because you haven't heard from them at all.
Right, correct.
Whereas the withdrawal ones are interacting with you and telling you why they withdrew.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay, that's the difference.
Exactly.
Is there anything that board members can be doing that are representatives of these library types to assist you with the libraries that are not responding or are voluntarily withdrawing?
It's a really good question.
So what I would say is when Dan says that we are proactive about these types of interactions, we truly, are really having a lot of conversations with them around that. I think if we were in a scenario where it's this suspension where people aren't responding at all, I think there may be opportunity to reach out to people who are in some of these types just to ask if you have any connections with these folks, if there's anyone else that we should be talking to that we don't have access to within L2. So maybe there is some opportunity there in the sense of non-communicative folks. When it comes to these decisions, they do have that decision that they're able to make. We obviously try to give them all the understanding of the benefits that they receive as Rails members. But ultimately that choice is still up to them. But for the folks that we're not hearing from, sometimes there is information that you might have that might be helpful. So I think it's something we should consider.
Yeah, I do want to note that there's some trends in these members.
Yeah.
If you see that there's 4 hospital libraries on this list, I sort of assume that at some point we will have 0 hospital member libraries. It's just going away, kind of. And I'm sorry that that's the way it is, but that is the way it is.
Yeah.
There are 6 private schools on this list. The 2 academic that are on here are both medical hospital serving institutions. You see a lot of for-profit special libraries that are either, the result of mergers or they are moving all of their collection online, that sort of thing. So there's some larger trends that we just can't control.
And I would say for some of you who are newer to this process, those trends are pretty consistent, especially since COVID with private schools and with special libraries. Those are things we've seen year over year in terms of these kinds of changes.
Yeah.
And it leads to my question. So this being my first year seeing this list, is this a large amount? Is this a regular amount? Like, where does this?
This is a regular amount since the pandemic. Yeah.
And I'm curious, because the ones that are going to be suspended are all school libraries. Is this a direct result of they no longer have a school librarian? And therefore, there's no one who would respond back. Okay.
We don't know for sure, but I would assume.
The sad list.
Yeah.
It is a bad list. Yeah.
This is not stuff we want to
Yeah,
see.
we
Or
enjoyed it.
And I think our conversation shows we don't like this either. And thank you for trying to the nth degree.
Yeah, well, again,
Really.
so much of this is those folks who I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That's 99% of the contact that we've had with.
Yeah, because those reminders are in bold red comments. If I was
And
part of
every
the
week.
But no, they remind you.
Hard to ignore. Yeah, like actively hard to ignore.
I'm like, I'll
It
submit my
means and
non-resident
everything.
policy. There you go. Thank you for all that. Greatly appreciate all the work.
Any other questions for Dan? May I have a motion and a second for the approval of the certification report, including withdrawal and suspension of members and requesting final approval from the state library?
So moved.
Second. Sorry, second. was
Alice.
Alice, thank you. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next, Monica will go over some updates to policy on public comments, public comment rules.
So we have 3 policies to discuss with you all today. Before we get into those, I just want to especially thank our policy committee chaired by Gwen Gregory, and all of the participants on that have offered really valuable feedback. And we've been able to, as part of that process and going through the handbook this year, we recognized that there had been some policies that have not been formally reviewed in quite some time here at Rails. So some of the policies that you're seeing here today are a result of the request to go back through those policies and look at them for potential updates. So the first one that you're seeing is public comment rules. This This isn't necessarily a formal policy per se, but these are the rules that the board adheres to in terms of what we look at for public comments. As you can see, these had not been updated. I think maybe since the early days of the formation of Rails. And so there were some recommended changes just based on best practice as we know it, and how the public access counselor of the Office of the Illinois Attorney General has ruled on some of these issues of public comment in the Open Meetings Act. And so those are the changes that you'll see. So those changes include omitting a time limit on public comment, omitting a section allowing the board the opportunity to deny public comment based on repetition, changing the limit from 20 minutes on each subject to 30 minutes total unless the board unanimously votes to extend, and an addition noting that the public comment policy applies to all committees, subcommittees, and subsidiary bodies of the board. Gwen, is there anything you would add to this discussion for public comment rules?
Can I ask about that first bullet point? Is that true?
About omitting the time limit? That you mean that that's a best practice?
Yes. Or is Open Meetings Act these? Okay, so this, we're saying that we want to do these because it's best practice, not because it's required or prescribed by Open Meetings Act.
So sometimes what is listed in the Open Meetings Act ends up being a little more general, but there have been further follow-up from the public access counselor. So someone who said that the public body was in violation of the Open Meetings Act, and then the public access counselor has to rule on that. And so a lot of what you're seeing here are based on rulings that end up being a way of establishing what that best practice should be going forward. Is there anything you'd add to that, Joe, in terms of, yeah?
After sitting through a few too many school board meetings recently where the 3-minute buzzer was buzzing and the mic got cut off on people speaking, that one caught my eye.
And people are able to establish their own rules. This is just based on what we know as a best practice is our recommendation.
And if you read the changes, it's not actually omitting.
Right, yes, I should clarify.
There's a little waffle on the board president being able to give people kind of
More time.
more time, and so it kind of clarifies that.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
Nobody wants them to go over 5 minutes.
Yes.
Since this policy would also apply to committees, should that be board president or the committee chair?
That's a good question. I think we could add that and just say as that. Yeah, I think we could. That's a good point, Alex. Any other comments or questions on these changes?
4.3, an overall limit of 30 minutes. There's no indication here how, our body hasn't had lines of people ready to speak to us. But if there were, if you're allotting 3 to 5 minutes per person and there were 30 people wanting to speak, this policy doesn't give instructions on how to choose which of those 30 people get to speak at 30 minutes.
So I think what this rule allows for is that there are 30 minutes total of public comment, but if the board would like to extend that time because there was a lot of people who were available to do that, they could do so. The board would just have to vote that they wanted to extend the amount of time for public comment. So if there was a big issue where there were a lot of people who were coming to speak and the board wanted to hear from them, that's absolutely an opportunity that the board has.
And I will also say that having experienced this a lot recently, one of the things that allows the board to do is to say, we will allow all of the people who are currently in line or signed up to speak, and that's it. So that you can't keep adding people to the end, which unfortunately can also happen. So
Okay,
as they extend it, they can say, okay, we have, 5 more people.
right.
Extend just for those 5 people.
I like the sound of that. My worry is that, there were 30 names on the list and you were gonna say the first 10 can speak or something. Like, I wouldn't like that idea. Okay.
All right, I will make the motion to approve the public comment rules with the
As amended,
addition of the board committee chair throughout.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ken? Let's see. Is this one a roll call? I lost my place here.
This,
Nope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have a policy update for the provision for an appeal of board decisions on member libraries.
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex noted, this is the policy for the provision for the appeal of board decision on membership. So this is a policy that has never been used. And so this is another one that has just been around since the beginning of Rails. But we wanted to review it as part of our policy committee. As part of their April 22nd meeting, this was reviewed after also being reviewed at previous meetings. The last time, as we noted, that this was updated was July 1st, 2011. So the actions outlined have never been used. It is important that this avenue still exists should it ever need to be. Part of the work that the committee did was to review copies of the Rails membership application. And then they also looked at the Illinois Heartland Library System's appeal form as part of that discussion. And so you'll see some of the changes. They include changing the word complaint to grievance and complainant to grievant throughout the policy. And it clarifies the section of the meeting where grievance should be received, as well as establishing that timing of a subsequent decision by the board. So the committee did approve this draft policy as you see presented and did vote unanimously at their April 22nd meeting to recommend it for approval to the Rails board. Anything else to add on this one, Gwen?
Questions?
Pretty straightforward.
Very good.
I'll move it.
All right. Do we have a second to approve the provision of the appeal?
Second, Julie.
Thank you.
Yolanda.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. So the last new policy under new business is the meeting via electronic means policy update.
Thank you, Alex. So this one was discussed by the Rails Board Committee on May 17th. They reviewed this policy on meeting via electronic means after also reviewing it at previous meetings. The last time that this policy was updated was August 4th, 2018. So this policy, as you know, kind of goes through how the board can participate electronically and be compliant with the Open Meetings Act. Rails has special abilities through the Open Meetings Act because of our sheer size. And so what that does is allow that any library system with a jurisdiction and geographic area of more than 4,500 square miles. And if you remember, Rails has about 27,000 square miles. And so we have special provisions that are outlined. And so you would see those there. So in terms of the changes, there was a recommendation to change the language in number 5 to allow for a board member or committee member, because again, this is something that applies to all Rails board committees. So similar to what you saw in the first one. And then there was an add that was recommended and affirmed by our legal counsel for number 13. And this is to be compliant with a more recent law. So it says board members or committee members attending a meeting remotely must comply with 625 ILCS 512 610.2b, which prohibits persons from using an electronic communication device to participate in any vehicle conferencing app like Zoom while operating a motor vehicle. So in other words, you cannot be on a Zoom meeting for Rails while driving a vehicle car. So that's kind of the substantial adds that were made by the committee. Anything else that you would add there, Gwen? Any questions about this one?
If not,
Sitting in your car, but not driving.
Yes, you can sit in your car or be a passenger in a car, but you cannot be driving the vehicle.
all right. May I have a motion and a second to approve the policy on meeting via electronic means as presented?
So moved, Alice.
Alice, thank you.
Second, Karen.
Karen, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We will move on to unfinished business and the system area per capita grant application and the fiscal year 2025 budget.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to get us started and then I'm also going to hand it over to Sharon and there'll be a lot of time for questions and other comments. So as you probably saw, we spend a lot of time and effort on this process of really looking very closely at the Rails operations plan for the coming year as well as the budget. We also made a couple of small changes just to this process for the board this year in just providing a little bit more understanding of trends and patterns over the last 5 years. I want to thank Sharon for creating some of these graphs, which you saw in my first memo. That's meant to show you sort of some of the trends of revenue and then also expenditure for Rails over the last 5 years, so you can get a sense of how those things move forward. I do want to especially extend our thanks to the Illinois Secretary of State, Alexi Janulius, for that system and area per capita grant. And that was the funding that Rails received, of course, in fiscal year 24. And part of this process is that the state library has instructed us to submit this operational plan and budget based on an annual revenue of $11,871,714. So we're very thankful for those funds and all the wonderful things that that can do for our Rails members. But as a reminder, this is not our entire budget because it does not include projected revenue of approximately $6 million that's received through other avenues. So that is reimbursement revenue, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Fees from services and materials, including eRead Illinois and the Illinois Library Delivery Service contract, and then also investment income, which was quite substantial last year compared to previous years. And you'll see some of those changes there. So if you want to look just really briefly on the memo, it can kind of show you those trends in proposed revenue. What you'll see in terms of the, and Stacey, I apologize. Is it possible to share any of that on the screen while we talk? If not, okay. But just I kind of want to just show you how some of those things are moving. And what that would essentially be is that major revenue, which is that system and area per capita grant that we received, starts kind of in fiscal year 2020. It's sort of an even level. And then you'll see that change that happened at fiscal year 2023. So when you see the way that some of that changes, thank you. And if you just scroll, the memo, the budget memo, I'm sorry, Stacey. What that would do is just kind of show how those things move up. So we saw that substantial change. The other piece that you'll see move up is the reimbursement, and you'll see that reflected on the expenditures line as well. So there is sort of a light brown line, and I'll show that to you in just a moment, that kind of indicates how those changes are. And that's mostly due to some of our library materials piece. So I think when you saw Layla come last month and talk about our deals and discounts program and how that has in particular grown, especially since fiscal year 2022, with a lot of the additions via the EBSCO program, there's been a lot of changes in what we take in, but all of that is done entirely on a cost recovery basis. Thank you, Stacey. If you just scroll back up to the perfect, yes. So that first kind of pie graph shows you the area per capita grant. That's that biggest blue piece. And then you'll see the reimbursements line as well as the fees for services. If you just scroll down a little bit, then you can see sort of the budget trends that we're talking about. So that goes from that fiscal year 2022 to the change in fiscal year 2023 in terms of what we receive through the system area and per capita grant, as well as how those reimbursement trends change based on that cost recovery basis. And then if you just scroll down, Stacey, just to the expenditures piece, you'll see those same trends reflected. This is, of course, the breakdown of how the budget, the proposed budget comes down. And if you'll go down just one more to the next graph, Thank you. This also shows how some of those expenditures come through. So this just sort of breaks it down into those multiple areas. Personnel is pretty self-explanatory, or contractual services, including what we do with delivery in our facilities, and then our library materials. I did just want to clarify that one because I know I received a question on that. So that also is primarily related to our deals and discounts program and some of the changes that you'll see through there. So that substantial growth comes because we have so many more libraries participating in that program. This is something that we will be looking at very closely this year, as we know that the statewide database purchase is going to have a lot of impact in how our own EBSCO deals go. So that while we're projecting all of these changes that are happening through our budget, it's all based on a everything being equal kind of process. If things are changing and moving forward, you may see really big changes in terms of what we're spending and also what we're getting back, because people may not need to at the same level in some of these programs. So before we get into the rest of it, I wanted to make sure you all saw that and understood it. And if you had any other questions, that we had an opportunity just to ask that here. Okay. Thank you so much, Stacey. I appreciate that. What I would just note is that we did in the memo highlight some of the changes that you'll see. Some of the biggest changes, of course, is anything, because you saw what a percentage was related to personnel. Any change with personnel is going to result in a larger number. So we detailed all of those for you here as well. We are also continuing to look at replacement vehicles. So that was a big thing that we were able to approach in fiscal year 2024. And that trend is continuing with that $460,000 next year. We are also looking at some of those changes that we highlighted for you in that capital assessment process that you saw at the board. So that kind of showed some of the maintenance that we needed to do for this building here at Burr Ridge, and kind of broke it out year by year of what we're going to have to do. And so we are starting to look at some of that. So we detailed for you here what some of those changes will be. But there's a lot here, as you could see, as you were looking through Sharon's very detailed budget commentary, that there's a lot in terms of general changes. So I'm going to pass it on to Sharon to highlight some of the other budget changes as well.
Thank you, Monica. So I just wanted to highlight the differences between fiscal year 2024 and 2025, mostly. So the fiscal year 2024 general fund was budgeted to leave a surplus of approximately $255,000. The fiscal year 2025 general fund is budgeted to have a surplus of $469,100, but with the planned purchases from the capital projects fund for the items that Monica mentioned, vehicles and the needed repairs here at Burr Ridge, and also some long deferred maintenance at Coal Valley, because we're continuing those projects. We do have a budget deficit overall between those two funds of $278,900, which will be coming out of our reserve funds. Revenues are budgeted to increase $965,277, primarily from an increase in the ILDS contract fees and anticipated fuel recovery charges that we pass along to them. And this is the delivery service that we do to support Carly. As well as the expansion of the Find More Illinois and the eRead Illinois programs, the revenue of which that you see in the fees for services and materials account. The growth of the group purchase program, which Monica mentioned, you can see a fairly exponential growth in the last few years, just the expansion and the increased participation. And this is specifically this year in the areas of EBSCO, adding JSTOR and the anticipated new products that will emerge throughout the year, as well as an increase in investment income. And you've seen that we've been consistently above budget throughout all of fiscal year 2024. The Federal Reserve has steadily increased rates and kept them at that increased level. We're currently $551,000 above our fiscal year 2024 budget. So we did budget a modest $300,000 increase, and that takes into account those gradual decreases that are expected as well. Expenditures are budgeted to increase $751,622, and this is primarily due to the growth in the group purchase program, which completely offset the revenues above, so it has no effect on the bottom line. As Monica mentioned, this could be dramatically impacted by any sort of outcome that impacts EBSCO from that statewide database program that is soon to be announced. So this is also impacted by those 3% increases for staff that were mentioned in Monica's memo and also in my commentary. This is consistent with what Illinois Heartland Library System is doing for their staff across the board, and is also consistent with what we've seen at a lot of member libraries, because a lot of them are saying that they're awarding between 3% and 4% for this coming fiscal year. And this is also due to the anticipated increase in health insurance cost. We budgeted 8.5% of an increase, as well as the addition of the 3 positions that we have added for fiscal year 2025, added or continued. So we have a new position to support the group purchase program. And as well as continuing the temporary position, the data internship to support the data analysis department. And a new temporary position to support the World Language Cataloging Service program with the increased, exponentially increased need that we've seen in that program. We do have some organizational structures and changes built in order to keep us sustainable and competitive, given all of the increased programs that we're anticipating adding in fiscal year 2025, as well as some restructuring. And we do have a 6% increase budgeted in cost for our delivery outsourcing contractors cost. This is just, we attempted a budget worst case scenario, what we could see. Of course, this could change pending negotiations starting. We do have increased expenditures to support the World Language Cataloging Program, as well as, of course, member needs have increased, which I just noted. Expenditures to support the further accessibility of our websites with that accessibility audits that was mentioned in Monica's memo and also mentioned in my budget commentary, and some transcription services. And of course, we did budget for increased legal fees to support us as we begin union negotiations in fiscal year 2025. And those were the main items that I wanted to highlight. Did you have any questions as you reviewed all of the documents as part of that packet?
Under supplies, postage and printing.
Yes.
I was confused why there would be a version of the podcast room for staff under that particular area. It's not supplied postage or printing. You know, why is it there?
So that is basically to get new furniture, which will be under our capitalization threshold of $5,000. So the furniture is charged to our general office supplies, and that's under that supplies, postage, and printing category. That's the general category provided in the structure in the state libraries accounting structure that they.
In paper, you know, stamps.
Good question, yeah.
That's a fantastic question. Thank you.
And just for everyone's information in terms of rationale with that podcast room, that used to be something in terms of our practice that we used around how we recorded, but we have since moved to using mics that we're able to move from place to place. Also, the podcast room was very popular sort of pre-Zoom adoption by everyone. And so we've also recorded a lot of Zoom podcasts over time as more and more people got comfortable and had better equipment and made that available. So it's just not a pressing need in the same way. And as we reorganize some of these staffing spaces, we wanted to be able to address it and use that. Mm-hmm.
I do have a question about discontinuing filing E-rate.
Yes. So we have chosen to discontinue filing E-rate. We did it internally, but the program itself is making changes in how it's administered and increasing the workload of the process. Currently, we're only getting back, I want to say $6,000 if my memory is serving me correctly. And doing an analysis of the staff time that it takes to go through the 18-month filing process versus what we're getting from the process. We determined that it was no longer beneficial for Rails as an organization to continue, but we will keep evaluating. You'll have in case programs come up and we need to reevaluate that decision, and also looking at the potential of potentially using an outsourced consultant to a future if the opportunities arise.
Thank you.
One thing, the security cameras, were those for the issues with the theft that we were having with the cars? The catalytic converters?
It's to be consistent. We have security cameras around the outside of the building here at Burr Ridge and around all the rest of our buildings as well. And adding the security cameras to our Rockford location is to be consistent with that and provide more security for our staff. But not directly tied to that, but it will definitely help with monitoring that type of activity. And at our new Rockford facility, we have space inside to park the vehicles. So there's no longer as much opportunity for that to occur.
And just so everybody remembers, we moved to a new Rockford location. So that's part of that standardization effort is as we're in a new location, making sure that everything is just like all the other locations at Rails.
Great. Any other questions? Hearing none, may I have a motion and a second to approve the system area and per capita grant application for fiscal year 2025? And the fiscal year 2025 budget and send to the state library for final approval.
So moved, Julie.
Julie?
Second.
And Yolande, thank you. Stacy, would you please call roll?
Rosie Camardo.
Yes.
Jane Carroll.
Yes.
Alice Creason.
Yes.
Glenn Gregory.
Yes.
Diane Hollister.
Yes.
Jennifer Hubenick.
Yes.
Renee Leba.
Yes.
Julie Melovic.
Yes.
Tom Stick.
Yes.
Alex Fantina.
Yes.
Vanessa Villarreal Renzo.
Yes.
Karen Wojtek.
Yes.
Yolande Wilbur.
Yes.
Jeffrey Yanikowski.
Yes.
And Monica Keldicott.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 9.2, I have a brief update on the executive director evaluation process. Thank you all for completing the evaluation survey. You should be receiving those results within the next week, and we'll discuss the executive director's evaluation in closed session at the June board meeting. The board will also determine any change in compensation for the executive director to coincide with the changes in compensation for all rail staff at the start of the new fiscal year. Glenn Gregory and I will meet with Monica to discuss the findings and recommendations from the compiled evaluation. Are there any questions about the process? Okay. Next up, we have Grant Halter and Quinn McKissick with the Rails ebook data project.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to get things started off and just give a quick review and summarize the memo that I wrote in your board packet about our experience with the data internship process. This was the first time we'd ever done anything like this. And it was really in an effort to provide new and unique opportunities for library students or recent graduates to get access to systems work, especially, but also library data work, because we know these opportunities can be few and far between. And as we've discussed with Quinn, that you'll hear the experience with data in the MLX programs is a little different than just kind of our real world day-to-day work with the challenges of cleaning data and organizing it and kind of bringing all that into analysis. I can certainly happy to say that Quinn has done exceptional work throughout their time at Rails. They started back in December, and with a fairly difficult project that they chose to tackle the e-read data. That's been a lot of back and forth with Rails staff and Baker and Taylor representatives to kind of corral the complexities of the data set and turn it into useful, functional, sustainable data sets that Rails can kind of keep going and using even beyond Quinn's time, which is coming to an end at the end of June. So we're happy to have Quinn for a little bit longer. But yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome, Grant. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead now and share some slides and talk about some of the findings of all of the work I've been doing in terms of analysis on the eRead project. All right, looks like I am sharing that screen. So yeah, I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about some of the things I found. First off, I've got this slide here sort of showing the timeline of what I've been working on, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but the main thing I want to note is that I've got this infographic here on the right sort of showing the stages of data analysis. And I think it's, worth noting, right, that in practice, right, we don't go smoothly from stage to stage and then finish. Especially with eRead, what we found is I collected and cleaned a lot of data, started to analyze it, and then realized there were a lot of inconsistencies or straight up gaps. Oh, we're missing data for this chunk of this year back in 2014. And so it's good just to keep in mind that both data work like this involves a lot of time and also involves a lot of going back. We've spent a lot of time, like Grant said, communicating with Baker and Taylor and going back to sort of address a lot of these inconsistencies that we found in the past decade of eRead data. So that's sort of a mindset to keep in mind as we talk about all of this. So I've got some numbers here from circulations for the calendar year of 2023 at a glance. And yeah, it's just worth noting this was another thing that made our project challenging. This is a really, really large set of data, right? We've got nearly 500,000 circulations, and that's just for 1 year out of a decade. And so it was really important to find ways to process this in a way that makes sense. So I've got some examples of the trends in the 2023 circulation. It's worth noting, right, the vast majority of those eRead circs come from public libraries. That's about 3/4. Our next largest is those school libraries. And then the small percentage here in the other category is things like special libraries, government libraries, academic libraries. Then I've also got circulation broken down by audience. We can see that our biggest audience group is adults. Primarily adult fiction is our largest circulating category, more than half. Our next largest category is children's. And then our smallest category is teens. And probably unsurprisingly, right, across all of these demographics, fiction is more popular than nonfiction. So I want to zoom out and focus beyond 2023, right? What have sort of the eRead circulation trends been more broadly? And we can see that over time, since 2014, circulation was rising, had a peak in 2020, and then since then, that pandemic bubble has popped and we've returned to roughly 2019 levels. And I think it's helpful to zoom in a little more and focus on 2018 to present. And I've divided this here by public libraries, on the top here in the light green, and school library circulation in dark green on the bottom. And we can actually see, right, that we had, right, in both cases, a big peak for public libraries, early 2020, school libraries a bit later. But since that peak, right, since 2021, our public library circulation is actually remaining really consistent, comparable to 2019 levels, whereas our school library circulations have been decreasing very slightly since then. So that's something to keep in mind, right, as we're considering this drop. A lot of it is coming from school libraries. And now another thing that I looked at, right, is because we have circulation data for a decade, we also have purchasing records from a decade. And this data is a little complicated to look at because the way we purchase is complicated, right? So there's a variety of license types that you can get for digital materials. And the thing is, right, all of these license types and price points are determined by the publisher, and the publishing is dominated by those big 5 publishers. And so for a given title, we don't necessarily have a choice of what kind of license we have. If that title comes from Penguin Random House, it will follow Penguin Random House characteristics for how they set their price points. In general, some trends with licensing, audiobooks are mostly a perpetual license, so we buy it once and have it forever. And ebooks are more likely to have those non-perpetual licenses where they expire either after a given amount of time or a given number of circulations. And so one interesting trend that I found when looking right over the past decade of purchasing is that it used to be a given that audiobooks were always a perpetual license. But in 2019, we started seeing a rise of the expiring license instead. And again, right, we should keep in mind, this is not our purchasing librarians suddenly deciding to take a less favorable license. It was because some of these publishers were changing what they offered. And this is really concerning because even if a 2-year license were cheaper, right, it's always going to be a worse deal than a book that never disappears, right? We have a lot of titles that are perpetual titles purchased all the way back in 2013, 2014 that are still circulating today that have more than made up the cost of the initial one. So a perpetual license is always going to be better. But a concerning thing is these 2-year licenses, which are less favorable, are not necessarily even cheaper, right? We can see 2 examples of these major publishers that have switched from only offering perpetual licenses for audiobooks to only offering 2-year. And we can see that for both of them, the price point that they're giving for the 2-year is almost exactly the same as the perpetual. So in this case, right, we're paying the same amount for an item that now expires. And generally, this also reflects another concerning trend, right? This 2023 ALA report found that on average, libraries are paying 3 times as much as consumers for ebooks and audiobooks. And I found that that bears out in some of our e-read data as well. So I've got example titles here from each of the big 5, and I pulled just a random title that has a typical price point for that publisher, and then looked up what would this cost on Audible. And so we can see for each of them the Audible price and the Rails price, and we can see that sort of roughly in line with that ALA statistic, we are paying a whole lot more for audiobooks than consumers are. And usually when consumers buy them, they're perpetual. So we're paying high prices in comparison to consumers for sometimes a product that expires. And then, so I looked at circulation and I also looked at cost trends, and then I wanted to bring those together to look at cost per circ. And so right now, right, if we look at everything, all we've spent on e-read and all the circulations we have, it's about $1 and change per circulation. But if we look over time, right, we can see that that has decreased exponentially, right? And that's in a large part because of these perpetual titles that we bought in 2014 have continued to circulate over the past decade. And so it's worth noting that that cost has gone down over time, but it might not continue to follow this trend as more and more publishers move away from the perpetual licenses. And so now I've got a breakdown here of for ebooks and audiobooks, the various license type and what their cost per circulation is. And I think it's worth noting that in both of these cases, for ebooks and audiobooks, the perpetual is always going to have a better cost per circulation than any other options. And let's see, how are we doing on time? I want to make sure I don't use up too much time, so I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but there's some interesting trends there. Ah, perfect, bless. Yeah, and finally, talking about sort of what I'm planning on doing in these last few weeks as I wrap up my internship, or more broadly, right, what the data team will need to do to continue processing the e-read information. Right, the most important thing is maintaining those communications with Baker and Taylor. We still have some ongoing questions about the way the data is structured and changed over time. And like I said, sort of it's a constant cycle of reviewing, making sure that the information they're sending us makes sense. Some other things we're considering is ways we can join all the circulation information with other info we have about different member libraries and possibly making that an interactive experience. And then also something we've been talking about is writing up an article on sort of my experience through this internship. So those are some of the steps moving forward for this project. Like I said, there's a lot of data, so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to clean it, but also a lot of cool insights we can gain from it. So those were my slides, and now I'm open if anyone has any questions I can answer.
I'll hop in real quick before any questions, but I'll just reiterate how much work Quinn did to kind of right the ship on this e-read data. We had a lot of data that was complicated and required many meetings with Baker and Taylor to kind of get on the same page as them to understand where everything's going. So the fact that Quinn has made it to doing so much analysis on the project at this point has been truly incredible and has set Rails up for a great continuation on cleaning this data, managing this data going forward, so that we can provide more of this analysis and dashboards and things like that for the members going forward.
I have a question, not really for Quinn, but more regarding the analysis and what the end result was. It looks like the big 5 are trying to have some kind of a, can't think of the word, Happily? Yes. I was thinking of games and Chutes and Ladders were coming into my head. And I'm wondering, you know, how can we as Rails put something maybe into make a bill on this to prevent a monopoly?
We are very lucky to have Anna Beam and Layla here with us today, also who work very extensively on these ebook products, and know a lot about this. I know they've talked extensively about strategy in terms of the big five versus some of the indie publishers and how we can do that. Is there anything that either of you would say just about strategy around that for Rails?
Strategy wise, I think, this is a great and an amazing step. I feel so lucky that I chose to do Illinois as a project, for the first data internship. And so I think this is a fantastic start from. I think, communicating with other libraries, with other ebook consortia, that's something that we've sort of touched on a little bit in the past, is getting data from like some of the Overdrive groups, and then comparing and contrasting with what we're seeing with eRead, and sort of building this larger statewide picture, and then having that in sort of our arsenal. We're communicating to some of the stakeholders. I know there was recently some legislation that was passed that we're hoping will be helpful. So far, we haven't seen too much action come with that. I know. What else would you add?
Yeah, it is, when we're working with a popular collection, and those 5 publishers control a lot of those popular titles. There have been, the Palace Project is a project that is trying to explore ways to bring in some of those indie titles and at more favorable terms. So some different models, like you buy one and you have 12 circs, but you pay $10 for it. So for a popular title, some of them just have a 2 or 3 month really window that they're really popular. But the thing about that is really the titles. We have learned over the 5 years, our members really, where they need the assistance is in these long holds on popular titles that are these 5 publishers. It is a topic, just a continuing topic for the last 5 years. And complex in terms of getting legislation passed that can help. Because you'd think it would be like a print title, we're protected with our print titles. These are licenses and they behave differently. And so.
And I would just add really briefly, again, just to reiterate some of what Layla said and what you saw Quinn present here, is that this is a huge issue, across the country, but certainly within Illinois. And there are many, many library consortia of ebooks and audiobooks throughout. But one of the real benefits of being able to do a project like this is that eRead is so huge compared to any of those that we can really look at trends and assume that a lot of those trends are being seen across the state. So our hope is that we can use this data to help to tell the story for some of these legislative pieces that have come out. It's very hard for legislators and your average user to understand this in a way that's easy to digest. And so our hope is that having data points like this will help to tell that story that can strengthen, the sort of relationship of the legislation and some of these other efforts that are happening going forward.
I would add that I think with legislation, what's happened in states where they have passed it, the language is that the publishers need to set a reasonable amount of the cost, but what is reasonable, right? What's reasonable to you is different than what's reasonable to me. And so that's where it can become very challenging. But I do have a question for Quinn. First of all, thank you so much. This is outstanding work. And as Monica mentioned, this really can be used in a number of ways to help our boards and our legislators really understand the challenges that we face in meeting the demands for e-resources. But one question I have with this, was there any breakdown by library? I know there are a lot of libraries included in this, which is going to be, again, another massive data separation. But are there any trends that you're seeing? Obviously, public libraries more, but are there super user libraries versus libraries that maybe aren't using as much?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have necessarily in front of me right now, but I haven't looked specifically at the super users is an interesting idea, but that's definitely one of the things that Grant and I have been discussing of, right, ways that an interactive dashboard would be really, really useful is so that people can look at, oh, their specific library, what are the circulation trends, and also, right, things like number of users. And so unfortunately, I don't have like something I can pull up right now, but that is definitely, I think, one of our top priorities moving forward.
So in my library, our e-content circulation this year is 25% of our total circulation. So it's a massive thing for us. But one of the reasons that it is so high is because we have a librarian who treats this as it would a fiction collection. And a lot of times in libraries, e-content is almost a supplement. And as we see the heightened interest from the public, social media, from, you know, even authors now, are knowing that e-content is just as big, and they'll put special things in their e-content, for example. And as we're in a room with the continuing education group, is there a way to consider to mold this so that it could become continuing education like for librarians? Like, how can librarians harness these ideas and put them into work in maybe daily collection development practice? So that's just a connection I made while listening.
Do you all want to say a little bit about the forum that you did with library folks recently? Quinn and Grant?
The roundtable?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. We recently had a round table with some that was, I don't remember the exact number of people, but Rails members were able to come and ask a lot of questions and talk about some of the patterns that they had seen. And I think, yeah, there was definitely a lot of interest in the ways that like data like this can be integrated into people's practices. And I think also, yes, a lot of people who were not as familiar with digital collections were surprised by sort of the complications of the licensing and pricing. So yeah, I think that could be a good opportunity, but I don't know, Grant, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, certainly. That was a great it was a great roundtable. We had really good interaction with the Rails member staff. And so much so that we got great questions, many good suggestions for further analysis that we're hoping, depending on how Quinn's time shakes out in the month of June, to provide some kind of follow-up, whether it's another roundtable or like they mentioned, an article of follow-up analysis, just to kind of cap off the internship. Is something we're hoping for, but also this project will live on, and we're going to take all these suggestions that we've heard from members, make as useful kind of data products and dashboards as we can, so to kind of help inform the field and help people out.
Well, sort of expanding on what Jennifer was saying, from an academic library point of view, there's certainly academic libraries that are members of eRead, but not that many, as you pointed out. But academic libraries have like a whole other world of ebooks that are different. So it would be interesting to somehow get that together and pair them or talk about like the whole world of ebooks that for all the libraries, because and I don't know if that would be like a collaboration with Carly or some other kind of thing to really represent all the different kind of ebooks that different kinds of libraries are using in terms of like legislation and things like that.
I will just add that we did have an introductory conversation with the Illinois State Library, who brought together, folks from our eRead program, as well as the SHARE program in Heartland and the folks from Carly. And we found it very eye-opening in terms of their discussion around ebooks and how different it is from our own experience. And I think the State Library found that useful as well, as they're looking at the License to Read Act and how they want to move forward on things that would potentially be helpful. So I do think that those conversations are happening, and we are eager to continue to be part of those.
Right, because academic libraries, just to share with people, so like at my library, of our materials budget, we spend like over 90% of it on electronic resources of different kinds. So that's like the main thing, basically, that we spend all our money on.
Do you find that there's a lot of training with collection development in academic libraries that focuses on that kind of thing? Or is it just when you get there, that's what you do?
I don't know. I think that it's evolved that way over the past 20 years. So that's just kind of how it is, that's what people want in large part.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, like and I'm not going to talk about my whole library, I'll tell you that later, but you know, having somebody who really spends a lot of time mulling data like this specific to my library, I mean, has, like I said, 25% of, you know, 300,000 circulations is a lot. So putting it into that perspective, like eating not just interest, but maybe that's the path some, you know, that's how magazines went, right? Everything's digital now, everything's virtual. There's very few print anymore. So how do we future-proof and prepare libraries?
Right, like the open educational resources, those are digital, those are not print. We're not making print textbooks for free.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a situation of either or, it's a yes and. So that's the important part too, to prepare for it.
I have another question for Quinn and Grant, really. Quinn, how did you find this internship? And who were you gonna find to, I mean, do people apply to you for the internship? It's a 6-month internship. I just wonder, how did Quinn, being the first one, how did you find out about this? How did you go through this process to get here?
Yeah, so I actually found out about the internship through the Rails website, right? My school sends out like, I think a weekly jobs to consider, right? And they, right, say, oh, to look for additional public library jobs, right? Search the Rails site. And so that's how I became familiar with the site. And I would just check it periodically to look for those internships or part-time jobs, and also just sort of to keep a pulse, because this has been my last semester and I've now graduated. So like keeping an idea of what the job space is like. And so that was where I found it. And I, applied through those online portals there. And then Grant, I imagine you can speak more of what your experience of hiring was like.
Yeah, so this certainly has been an interesting experience. I worked a lot with Sam Daly, our HR manager at Rails, here to figure out how do we do internships at Rails? What does that mean? We have the title internship, but it's fully paid and it operates more like a kind of a temporary contract position that is open to kind of grad students in the program or recent grads. So we have learned a lot about how kind of internship best practices, especially from Quinn, about timing of things and how to word things and how to post it differently. It was originally posted for a full year, and that I believe the changes are going into a 6-month internship to kind of fit along the semester schedule will be better. But we like this opportunity, and I think the data team is a great place to have at least these first Rails interns, because we kind of have a branch to each different department, so that whoever we hired could choose from. I know I ran Quinn through a list of about 20 different options of projects on that first week of what are you interested in, what's going to be most beneficial for what you want in your career, and how to boost your resume for future library work. So it's certainly been a great experience, and we've learned a lot and are looking forward to continuing it.
We're really excited about that possibility of how those internships can move forward. And I think it was such a wonderful first experience. You can see the amazing work that Quinn did. And Grant and Sam really put a lot into what this process would look like going forward. Because one of our really long-term goals is to continue to grow our relationship with library schools that sort of feed into Illinois, so that there can be a real understanding of what it's really like to work in a Rails member library and the kinds of training that they might need to have. But we also really wanted to provide an experience that's valuable for the interns that we're taking on, so that they can have a project for a portfolio, that it can be valuable experience that they have when they're applying to future jobs. So it's trying to find that balance between something that will both benefit Rails and create that, but also really benefit the folks that are participating in this process. I stepped on your your question, Jude.
What I wanted to add has already been spoken to, but I wanted to commend Quinn on one thing that I really appreciated about your report is I feel like sometimes us in the library world, we get too hung up on lingo and we speak to other librarians. And what I noticed in your short synopsis of your data could be used for people in the non-library world to understand just in that one simple slide of your Audible versus what libraries pay. That spoke like 1,000 words. And I think you have a real potential if you go into this to affect like legislation on a state level and a national level. So I would recommend that you submit your work on a higher level because it was very illuminating in a very short, sweet, and simple format.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Kudos on your graduation. Yay.
Thank you.
I'll actually hop onto that too and say, as someone without a library degree or that kind of library background, I can say that Quinn has taught me a lot in this experience too, of connecting the library world with the data world. And Quinn has kind of worked masterfully to kind of balance all of that within all the meetings and presentations and analysis that they've done.
Thank you, Grant and Quinn.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Next up, we have Rails board member reports. Does anyone have any news about their library they'd like to share this month? Rosie?
We had our Reaching Forward conference and it was so good because I saw many of your faces there. So thank you for the support. I was chair this year, so I was so excited. I felt like it went really well. I had 2 drag queen story times, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, that were like, it spurred out into the room, like the room wasn't big enough. So I was so proud of that to give librarians that experience. Yeah, so I was just very proud of my committee. Join them, have your staff join them. If you're directors, this is great for them. It's a great experience for them. It's for library staff, so it's not for your managers or your supervisors. It's for your staff to grow. So I'm a big advocate for that. And I was very proud of it. I'm glad I'm shedding the skin and moving on to outgoing. So I'm really excited. And yesterday I signed my contract with ALA Editions for my book.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm so terrified, but it's just been really great. And I'm so proud. I'm glad I'm co-writing. I don't think that could have handled the full taking it on myself, but I'm really excited. And it's about story time. That's my niche. And just diversity and equity and inclusion in it. So I'm really excited for it. So.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yay.
Congratulations.
Well, not related to my library, but my other world. I'm the president of our teachers union, and you might have seen our union and my name all over the news because we brought a vote of no confidence against our superintendent on Monday, and are waiting to hear the school board respond to our call to have her removed. I have learned a lot about sharing a message and sharing the stories of how ineffective leadership hurts our students. So that's the other side of my life.
Just wanted to say, this is Diane from Bloomington. And I'm just happy to report that our books are back on the shelves after many of them were gone for years. So we're really happy. We were closed this week in Bloomington, and today I believe is our first full day of being open. So we're quite pleased, and our drawing is flat now. It's wonderful. You can come in one direction, and we have so many parking spaces, and they're working on the deck too. So we're very pleased at Bloomington.
Great news. Hopefully we can come visit soon. Anyone else? All right. that brings us to meeting recap and agenda building for next month. The meeting will be Friday, June 21st, 2024 at 1 p.m. Please note this is the third Friday of the month rather than the fourth due to the ALA conference. And on the agenda will be a report on member engagement strategies, an update on the World Language Cataloging Service Program, a report on the board election, a discussion of the organizational chart and compensation structure for fiscal year 2025, a review of the draft schedule of board meetings for fiscal year 2025, and a closed session to discuss Monica's evaluation. Lastly, June will be the last meeting for many of our departing board members, so I hope you can all attend. Is there anything else to add to the agenda for next month? All right, we do have a closed session. I'd like to take a short break before we do that, but if we could take that motion first and then we'll take a short break. I'd like to move into closed session to discuss matters pertaining to closed session minutes as per 5 ILCS Chapter 120, Paragraph 2, Section 2C21, which states a public body may hold closed session meetings to consider the following subjects: discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under this act, whether for purposes of approval by the public body of the minutes or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by Section 2.06. May I have a motion and a second to move into closed session?
Second.
Jean and Jen. We do need a roll call for this. Stacy?
Jean Carroll,
Yes.
Alice Friesen.
Yes.
Gwen Gregory,
Yes.
Megan Hollister,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubenick,
Yes.
Renee Leva,
Yes.
Julie Melvin,
Yes.
Tom Stagg,
Yes.
Alex Mancina,
Yes.
Vanessa Villarreal Krenzel,
Yes.
Karen Wojtek,
Yes.
Yvonne Wilburn,
Yes.
Catherine Janikowski,
Yes.
Monica Caldecott,
Yes.
and Rosie Camargo.
Thank you. We'll take a short break, reconvene in closed session at 12:05. Okay, looks like we're live. We are back in open session at 12:11 p.m. Do we have a motion and a second to keep closed session minutes of January 26, 2024 and March 26, 2024?
So moved.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening.
Okay, motion by Yolande. Do we have a second?
Second, Karen.
Karen, thank you. We do need a roll call for this. Stacy?
Alice Friesen,
Yes.
Gwen Gregory,
Yes.
Diane Hollister,
Yes.
Jennifer Hubenick,
Yes.
Renee Leva,
Yes.
Julie Melvin,
Yes.
Tom Stagg,
Yes.
Alex Mancina,
Yes.
Vanessa Villarreal Krenzel,
Yes.
Karen Wojtek,
Yes.
Yolande Wilburn,
Yes.
Catherine Janikowski,
Yes.
Monica Caldecott, Rosie Camargo, and Jean Carroll.
Yes.
Thank you, Stacy. Is there anything else to discuss before we adjourn today? If not, we are adjourned at 12:12 p.m. Thank you all for your time. Have a good holiday weekend.
Bye. Have a great weekend.